Christian parenting.
This is Cynthia Yanoff, and you're listening to Pardon the Mess. Each week we have honest discussions about the ups and downs of parenting and the lessons God is teaching us along the way. It's real, it's fun, and it's biblical. Life is messy. Don't walk the parenting road alone. Hey guys, welcome to Pardon the Mess. I'm glad you're with us. Happy summer. I hope you are managing well with all of your people around. Like all of us, I'm sure there's the up moments and the down moments. Absolutely. But I'm glad you're here today. You've snuck away for a few minutes. Maybe you're in your closet trying to get a little peace and quiet. I feel you. I hear you. And today we have Drew Dixon with us, and I am thrilled to have him. He has maybe one of my very favorite names of a ministry ever. It's called Love Thy Nerd. And he is all about video gaming. As a nerd that loves gaming himself, he's a self-proclaimed nerd. He wants to help others and invite us as parents into that world and to understand what it is our kids love about it. What are the misconceptions of gaming? What are some of the pitfalls when it comes to video games, but really how to love our kids in the middle of it. And I think this is a word so many of us need to hear. So many of us have kids that love video games, and we tend to take that position of either it's a waste of time or it's not good for you. And he helps us look on the other side of it and some of the usefulness, but also how to be relatable to our kids in it and also very careful. So I'm glad he's here. Love Thy Nerd, all things related to gaming. Here we go with Drew Dixon. Hey, Drew, welcome to Pardon the Mess. How are you?
Yeah, doing great. So glad to be here.
Well, thanks for being here. I know you have a podcast too, podcasts, plural. Yeah. And I love the title of what y'all do, Love Thy Nerd. And so let's start by just hearing a little bit about you and your people. Tell everybody, so they have some background on you.
Yeah. So I'm actually I work in Christian publishing. So for the last 7 years, I've been working in Christian publishing, producing student ministry curriculum at Lifeway. But my passion project for the last 3 years, well, really the last decade, has been doing nerd missions. Doing missions work among the nerds and geeks of the world. So people are into video games and anime and board games and tabletop, so like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff that some Christians think are evil. And but we want to reach those people. We see that as in some ways almost as like an unreached people group. That's kind of why Love Thy Nerd exists, is we exist to be the love of Jesus to nerds and nerd culture. And so prior to starting Love Thy Nerd, I worked for a ministry called Game Church, where we went all over the country to all these huge video gaming conventions to just look for ways to like share the love of Jesus with people. And then that sort of evolved, and some friends and I decided to start Love Thy Nerd, which is broader than Game Church. We're seeking to reach all kinds of nerds with the love of Jesus. And so that also involves like trying to understand video games and helping other people understand them. A big part of what we want to do with Love Thy Nerd is help people see the value in nerd culture and things like video games without not in a way that's just dismissive of its shortcomings and its dangers. So we want to educate the church on the value of nerd culture and help them engage it in a way that's like Christ-like, and that's going to honor him, and that's going to empower them to connect with people for the sake of Christ. In church, we talk all the time about sports ministry and things like that, but nobody thinks about how to reach more introverted, less athletic types, with the gospel. And I think the massive popularity of video gaming in the United States and really globally presents us with a really unique opportunity to do some really cool work. And it requires not just dismissing games altogether, right? It requires doing some homework and understanding them. And that's kind of what we're all about.
I love that. Okay. And so you have 3 kids. Tell us ages, wife and 3 kids. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I've been married for almost 13 years. And we have Evelyn, who's about to turn 10 next month. And then Gwyneth is 7, and Thatcher, our boy, is 3 and is an absolute terror.
I've got one of those too. I love that.
He's awesome, but also a terror.
Yes. There's always that one. Everyone should know there's always that one, especially if you get past 2 kids, that one that'll humble you. I was a great parent until that one. And I'm like, oh, gosh. Well, that's awesome. Okay. And so listen, are you a lifelong nerd? I just got to know. Let's just start right there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I grew up playing video games. I've owned just about every system that's come out over the years. And that was definitely my jam, like in middle school and high school, and even into college. I think there was a time in seminary. I went to seminary and from '05 to '08, and that was like a time when I was like, I got to get really serious about like studying theology, and I kind of put the video games away for a while. But
Yeah.
it was actually not long after that when I started. I actually served as a pastor at a church in Alabama for 5 years, and it was during that time that's when I kind of recaptured my love for gaming. I was like, I actually just like sort of gave myself some freedom to explore it again.
Yeah.
And so this is not inherently sinful. I can explore this and dabble in it. And I started doing that. And that's when I kind of recaptured my love for it and started writing. At that time, this would have been like oh 09 or 2010, somewhere in there. I realized there just weren't Christians, thoughtful Christians, writing about video games and helping people understand them and unpack them and see their potential and all those kinds of things. Really, the only Christians that were writing about video games were the ones that were going like, "Hey, you need to stop. You need to unplug them. Tell people not to play them. Like they're nothing but at best they're evil, and at worst they're waste of time." And so I saw that and said, like, I want to speak. Here's an opportunity to speak into this in a way that will be helpful and not so like fearful and
Yeah.
without the scare tactics.
Totally. Totally. And so listen, you're young. I'm older than you are. And so like I remember getting for Christmas, I have two older brothers, and we got the Atari system. That was the first one, right? I'm trying to make sure. Yeah, we got the
That was one of
Atari
the early
system.
ones. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And that was like big time, but that was not nerd, by the way. That was super cool to have that. Now, it never really clicked with me. I mean, I think I played it some or whatever, but it never really clicked. But it's interesting to look at the progression. If that's one of the earlier systems that came out to where we are now, and
Yeah.
and I'm raising a middle schooler that loves gaming, and I feel like like you get Xbox One and then like 2 years later, like that's so dead. You've got to move to this and that. And so as
Yeah.
a parent, my point being, it's so overwhelming, especially if you're not into it.
Mhm.
Like it's not really my thing. It's not really my husband's thing either. And so it would be easy. I can see, especially as parents or even in Christian culture, to be like, you know what, this isn't a good thing. This, because we just don't know
Yeah.
enough about it. And so I would love for you just to walk us through it a little bit. Like, what are some of the misconceptions as parents? What are some of the things we're missing when it comes to our kids that love video games?
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, I mean, I think, like I said before, I think the church's general attitude towards video gaming has been either it's a waste of time at best. Like the best view of video games the church has had in general is like, hey, you're wasting your time. At worst, it's like outright demonic. And I think neither of those are true. If we dig down and really think about what games are, they are they're digital forms of structured play. A game is a form of structured play. So a game at its heart is playful, it's rules based, and I think in the Bible we see a God who is playful. Like if you go back to the beginning, what's God saying about all that he makes? He's constantly like weighing in on the value of the of his own doing and saying, hey, these stars that I made, they're good. Like this vegetation and all these things, they're good. And who are they good for? They're good for us. And so when we dig deep into the Bible, I think we find a God who made a good world. And he doesn't tell us to just work it and keep it. He also tells us to make sure we create space in our life to stop being productive and stop making stuff. And I think games are opportunities to stop producing and making things and enjoy ourselves in a way that can be really beneficial and valuable. So, yes, I want to say to Christian parents, like there's a lot of things to be concerned about and wary of when it comes to digital entertainment. And you should have your radar up and you should be very careful. But there's a lot of potential in games as well. Like there have been tons of studies about the value of play, right?
Yeah.
Kids learn social cues and they learn how to win and how to lose, and they learn uh, their minds are engaged in ways that help their brain develop. We could go on and on. Like they're really good for kids socially and physically. I think the same is true of video games, although they may not have the same like physical like the same like you're not getting the same kind of exercise generally when you play
Yeah.
video games, but
Yeah.
your mind is being engaged in a way that can be really good for us.
I think there's different ends of the spectrum, but I think there's the households that are maybe like no video games, complete waste of time. We will not have it, like you kind of referenced a minute ago. And then I think there's some other households, and Drew, we're not going to point fingers, but it's probably my household, okay, where it's like I don't really have a problem with it to some extent. I mean, we kind of watch obviously what he's playing and how much time. I don't really have a problem with it, but I tend to be like, go do that. That's your gig, and I'm not going to be involved in that, or I'm not. That's that's my free time almost. I mean that sounds
Sure.
kind of worse than it is, but yeah, like okay, you
No, I
go
get it.
play. I'm going to take my hour to go do what I need to go do, but I hear you saying there's ways and it's necessary not only to be involved in monitor, but not even just for monitoring's sake, but to engage with our kids and love them well in that. And so as a
Yeah.
parent that's not a gamer that's listening to this is like, okay, educate me a little bit. How do I do that well with my kid? How do I get involved? Do I ask questions? That's kind of annoying. Do I sit and
Yeah.
kind of try to play? Well, they really don't want me that engaged because they have their headphones and their friends and they're like, oh my gosh, my mom's playing. So help
Yeah.
us engage well with this with our kids.
Yeah, I mean, I do think playing with your kids is a great place to start. You might be surprised that even your teenager in the right setting, like they don't want you on the online multiplayer when they're with their friends,
Okay.
but they probably would think it was pretty cool if you were like, if you found some like, family friendly ish game that you could play together. They might actually, you'd be surprised. They might actually think that's pretty neat. That you're at least the offer would be
Yeah.
pretty profound to them, I think.
Yeah.
But my kids are at that age where they love when I say I'll play. It's like the best thing ever for them right now. If I'll say, hey, let's play Roblox together, or
Yeah.
it's like Christmas came early or something. But yeah, I think asking questions, like you said, is also a really great place to start. And this is hard, I will admit, because when you ask some of these questions, like just tell me about your favorite game, like why do you like it so much? Just be genuinely curious. And it is hard because they're going to start sharing with you all kinds of details that, like, if you're honest, you probably don't care about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
I'm
is.
like, oh, sorry I
Yeah.
asked.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, my daughter's really into like the Percy Jackson books right now. And if you ask her a question about it, it's on. Like,
Yeah.
she is going to tell you all kinds of stories they're kind of based on Greek mythology. And don't worry, like, she knows it's not true. Like, promise we're a Christian household.
Right.
We're teaching them truth. And but get ready. She's going to tell you a bunch of stuff that you're not as into as she is, but you have to try to be into it and to listen and to ask and to understand. I think when you've made an effort to really understand, it's going to be received better when you say, hey, it's time to take a break. It's time to take a break and do something else. Yeah, I think those are really great places to start. I think, content is something that we need to be careful of, and there's some really great resources out there to help you understand that.
Yeah, what are some of those? That was one of my questions, is how do we get a handle on that? Because again, you can't take it from your kids that because I've had one of I say one of mine, there's no need to try to be discreet. We all know it's my middle schooler who's tried to explain to me like the difference between like real killing versus not, whether or not there's blood, and if it's, and I'm like, what's going on here? What world are we living in? I'm not following any of this. So where is like an outside source that you would say this is probably a good place to start, and they can answer some questions?
Now, and this is not a Christian website, but I really get a lot of help from Common Sense Media. I point people to that a lot. They're very detailed reviews of anything, games, movies, TV shows. And so you will know what your kids are stepping into when you read one of their reviews. And there's also parent reviews where parents actually go in. So you can read both like their professional written reviews, but then also like, practitioners of parenting are weighing in as well. I really like that. A friend of mine, his name is Andy Robertson, wrote a book called Taming Gaming that kind of delves into this topic of helping kids understand the value of games while also like navigating it responsibly in a way that's going to be good for you and for your kid and for your kids. And he has a website, taminggaming.com, where there's a database of games. And they're based on, these are actually recommendations. So games that could have some potential for your kid to play. And they're based on different values. So there's a list of like games that are relaxing or games that are good for co-op multiplayer for your family, like playing together as a family. You name it, there's a there's a database of games that they recommend that they've gone through and vetted. And then the third thing that I think is actually pretty helpful to understanding whether a game might be appropriate for your kid is Twitch. Have you heard of Twitch?
I have, but only because I'm super cool that way, Drew. No, I'm totally not cool, but I have heard of Twitch. But yeah, go
Because
ahead.
you have children. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, totally.
Twitch is this huge platform website. Just go to twitch.com. You can find out about it, but it's people streaming games. So it's like me playing a game and you get to watch me, or somebody else playing a game and you watch them. And I guarantee, like, if you have middle school or even like older elementary kids or older, they probably know what Twitch is. And they probably even, like, if they have the freedom to do so, they have a favorite streamer or two that they watch. But the reason this is cool for parents is that you can go on Twitch and search for various games and you can find people playing them. And so you can watch somebody else playing almost any game nowadays, because there's, I mean, millions upon millions of people streaming games on Twitch. So you want to know what the kind of content of a game is, like, just go watch somebody play it. And you'll get just for a few minutes, you'll get a sense of, and you watching for a few minutes and you're seeing like F-bombs and things and stuff. You say, okay, I'm not going to let my 8-year-old play this, right?
Right.
It's kind of a good way to get a sense of things yourself. And it doesn't take that much time. You can just watch a few minutes generally, and you kind of will have an idea of what's appropriate.
What would you be looking for? And that may seem really basic, but as a parent, as a Christian, and as a gamer, what would you be looking for when you're checking out? I know there's different ages of kids, but generally speaking, and maybe the younger kids we're not quite as worried about at this juncture, but I would be looking probably at violence. I'd probably be looking at language. What other things am I not thinking of that we as parents and believers need to be considering in what our kids are playing?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think the big thing actually that most parents are worried about now is actually not violence or sexual content. Those are things that are pretty easy. Just read a quick review or watch something, like watch 5 minutes of a game on Twitch, and you're going to know what kind of content's in there pretty much. I think what parents are worried about more than anything is addiction. We have this fear that our kids are going to be addicted. They get mad when we turn off their consoles. They throw a temper tantrum sometimes when we do that. And there's some tips on that kind of stuff as well. Like, don't unplug their video game right when they're in the middle of a level. Like, communicate, right? There's some little things you can do to be a bit more respectful in the way that you shut things down. But you do need to shut things down sometimes, right? But yeah, addiction, I think, is a big one. And so I'm kind of wary of games that are using psychology to keep us playing, using some kind of like well-known, like almost Pavlovian type of psychology, to keep kids coming back. So one of the big ones is loot boxes, things like loot boxes. So reward structures, the way games reward people for playing them. So loot boxes are these, it's basically like a slot machine. You play for so long and you get to open a loot box, and the loot box is going to randomly give you some kind of in-game gift. It could be a new outfit for your character. I'm not making this up. This is really what they give you. It could be a new what's called emotes, which is like a dance or like a saying your character could say in the game. You could open up like a new like tattoo or something for your character. All kinds of things like that, right? And so those kind of keep us playing because we like that. Like random rewards are actually keep us playing. That's why people keep putting the quarter in the slot machine, because a random reward is going to keep you playing far more and keep you coming back far more than something more tangible and more clear that's stated up front. Like, hey, if you play 3 games today, you're going to get this outfit or whatever it is. Like, that's less compelling than, hey, if you keep playing, you could get something amazing. Usually you don't, right? Just like the slot machine. Usually you don't, but that keeps kids coming back thinking, hey, I'm going to get something really rare, some new like weapon or unlockable content. And so, yeah, those kinds of things bug me. A lot of mobile games are built on similar kind of concepts. Things like Candy Crush Saga was a big one back in the day.
Yeah.
But kind of started with some of the social games too, like Farmville or those types of games. But I am more excited about games that have intrinsic rewards than extrinsic rewards with my kids. So when the reward is the game itself, I like that. When the reward is the experience of us playing together itself, like that's cool.
Hmm.
Um, that's where we build memories and have meaningful moments together playing games.
Yeah.
Um, it's not the little dance you unlocked or the outfit, right?
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I'm thinking about like a little game off my phone that my 5-year-old plays sometimes. And the reward, and it's like kind of educational. Um, I'm not that parent either, by the way. I don't even know how I ran across an educational game, but I'm sure I'm in a desperate plea for him to learn his letters. But it unlocks, like it has an aquarium, and each time he hits a level, then it unlocks something else for his little aquarium or whatever. I was just
Yeah.
watching him, and the other day I just taken away, and he's like, "I gotta have a starfish. I gotta have a starfish." And I was like, oh wow. Little did I know that we
Yeah.
were already starting. It was all with the dang
Yeah.
starfish. But that's
Mhm.
interesting to look at. And I'm going to put you on the spot with this though. Are there any games that you would say as they stand right now that you're just like, that's not a game that I can support or that I would let one of my kids play? Is there parents
Oh
want
yeah,
specifics? Like, are there ones you would say just like, no, as far as I'm concerned, no?
for sure. Yeah. There's a sizable list of those. I think
Okay.
the most famous one is like the Grand Theft Auto series. There's not much redeemable about that series, and it's not just the like wanton violence and sexual content and stuff. It's the way those games like depict um women. There's a lot of games out there that are pretty misogynistic. And so as a father of two girls, and a boy, like I don't want my kids playing things that make them feel diminished or um that call into question their value as an image bearer, you know.
Mhm.
So so those are things that I'm definitely like have my radar up for. And I think every parent should. And you know, like I said, it doesn't take a lot of it's some pretty like quick digging and you can figure out that kind of stuff too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. That helps us. Hey guys, I'm jumping in here to remind you that our prayer journal is now available for the 2021-2022 school year. It's called Joyful, Patient, and Faithful. And I wrote it as a tool for all of us to be able to pray over our kids well and do it together. And so it is now available. There are limited quantities, so be sure and grab your copy. If you would like one, you go to cpprayer.org. Again, that's cpprayer.org. That's where you get a copy. And then we will start in September praying attributes of our faith over our kids every week. And our Monday podcast will cover that as well. So be sure and get your copy now. Recommend it to your friends, your neighbors, your community group, whoever you want to join you in praying over their kids. It's called Joyful, Patient, Faithful at cpprayer.org. I also want to remind you to check out faithfulcounseling.com if you have not already. We're so grateful that they partner with us on Pardon the Mess, and Faithful Counseling offers online counseling available 24 hours a day. And I was reading some of their reviews and I really loved this one. And it said, "My counselor is so thoughtful, welcoming, kind, and caring. She's truly passionate in helping others find freedom, improve, and reach their goals to win their battles. I'm grateful for her willing and kind heart to help me be a better woman of God and leader." And I would encourage all of us to consider if we need counseling help, this is a great place to go. They will meet your needs. They come from a Christian perspective. And as Pardon the Mess listeners, you get 10% off your first month with Faithful Counseling. So go to faithfulcounseling.com/pardonthemess. Again, faithfulcounseling.com/pardonthemess. What are some, if you don't mind me asking, do you have some favorites right now? Some ones that you really like, maybe even for your age kids, but what are some favorites that
Yeah,
you're like, these are worth looking into?
sure. Yeah. I guarantee almost everybody listening to this podcast, or at least your kids, have heard of Minecraft. We
Yeah.
love Minecraft. It's super creative. Um, it's if you want it to be, it can be very like it can be very peaceful or it can be tense and fun. Like part of what makes games great is their reward structures. I sort of like had a warning about that a minute ago, but I think what's also great about video games is they can make us feel very productive and accomplished. That's good for your kids' self-esteem. So games with like good reward structures that aren't just getting you to keep playing, but they actually challenge you to think and to solve problems creatively. And that's what I love about Minecraft is it's very creative. There's creative problem solving. There's resource management. There's a lot of games that are big on resource management, like figure out how you're going to use these resources in a way that's effective and responsible and so forth. Those types of games, like there is some violence in this game, but I'm a huge fan of the Legend of Zelda series. It's not graphic violence. It's kind of more comical, but it's all like that's a whole nother discussion that we could get into. But I think the question about video game violence for me in a lot of ways is like, what's the purpose of that violence? Are
Yeah.
you like there is such a thing as violence that's done to protect the vulnerable and the innocent, and so that's different, I think, than violence that's done for selfish gain.
Yeah.
And so in The Legend of Zelda, the monsters you're fighting, you're doing that to make the world a better place and to protect the innocent and the vulnerable. And you're doing a lot of resource management and creative problem solving and all those kinds of things that are really good for kids' brains. There's a game called Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild that's just, it's got exploration, like you're exploring this massive world that's beautiful and mysterious and compelling. And it's not relying on those kind of cheap reward structures, I would say. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm a big fan of there's a couple that are big name games that you would have heard of. But again, like go to taminggaming.com and check out
Okay.
their database. And what you'll discover is like it's a huge world. I think we think of video games as this one thing. We think of it as first person shooters, or Mario. It's like either
Yes.
Mario, it's either
Yes.
Mario or it's Call of Duty, and Grand Theft Auto. And a lot of us aren't so like excited about Call of Duty because of the violence, and we're definitely not excited about Grand Theft Auto because of the sexual content and misogyny. But the truth is, it's a super diverse. There's all kinds of games. I mean, some friends of mine made a game about their losing their 4-year-old son to cancer. It's called That Dragon Cancer. That's like pretty gnarly to play because it's so sad. But there's a game that's about something really important, and it's a game. They're actually believers, and so the game is kind of the story unfolds from a Christian perspective. So like, I just want to say to people who are listening, man, if you, it's a really diverse world, and games are not one thing. We can't really label them as one thing. They're all different kinds of things, and a lot of it is worth exploring.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is so helpful. So as we're starting to wrap up, there's something else that I think about often and try to monitor. I think one of my major concerns also with gaming is like the chat rooms. And I'm sure that was just so
Yeah.
uncool how I even just said that. I'm sure they're not called that. Let's acknowledge it for what it is. But whatever the equivalent is of what I'm calling a chat room,
Yeah.
thoughts on that? I think sometimes our kids can think that there's community when they're not having community. And
Yeah.
so I would love just your thoughts on how that works. And I know some games like you're playing with your friends, which I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with. And then there's opportunities, I guess, for others to enter in, or you're playing against people you don't know. Could you just, I know that that's a huge world to unfold for us, but could you help
Yeah.
us know what to be concerned with and what to watch for in that?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. And you're right. It's not, playing games with people is a different level of community than, say, like attending a small group Bible study, or just like going outside and play your kids going outside the front door and playing with their neighbors, with your
Yeah.
neighbors' kids, that I think there's more opportunity for real, like genuine relationship there. That said, like there's more opportunity for genuine relationship playing an online game with friends, with like real people, with real friends, than there is like watching Netflix or YouTube, I think. So all that to say, I just think we need to keep it in proper perspective.
Yeah.
Um, there are lots of games that encourage you to play online and speak to each other through a microphone, and yeah, you open yourself up to some gnarly stuff if you do that. If you let your kids do that, you potentially open them up to things. There are ways to control that such that your kids can only get into voice chat with people they're actually friends with, and you can control their friends list to some degree. All this takes work, which is why it's easy. The easy thing for parents to do is just to be like, well, you're not playing online games. But I would say, like, again, there's a lot of potential in
Yeah.
playing online games together, because when you play Minecraft together, you're creative problem solving together. You're working it. There's teamwork, camaraderie, shared experiences, social connection, all those things. Like in a lot of ways, video games are the new playground of the future. All the things our kids learn on playgrounds that we know are really valuable. And I mean, playgrounds can be really beautiful places. They can be dangerous places, but they can be really beautiful and good. And so video games actually make the playground more accessible. It's becoming harder to trust. Like, and so, depending on where you live, it can be harder to just let your kid go free in a playground. I think they really need that experience, but in some places it's just not safe to do that. Sometimes it's not safe digitally, but there's the potential. There are ways you can control that as a parent, what kind of content they can engage online. Yeah, I think I would say my biggest tip here to the parents that are listening is just do a little bit of homework. You're just going to have to read a few articles, ask some friends. You have some trusted Christian friends, ask around. Go check out lovethynerd.com. We have some articles on these types of things. But yeah, do a little bit of homework so you know what you can control as a parent and what you can't.
These are good words, I think, for so many of us maybe that are not gamers or yeah. And I would let's wrap it up with this. Just encourage us how to love our kids' wellness, because if we're not naturally gamers, or our husbands aren't, our spouses aren't, or whatever, and maybe we're the jocks. I'm clearly not that, but and we always thought we'd have a super athletic kid, or we always thought we'd have some amazing artist, or they're in all the school plays or whatever. And maybe that's not it. And I think that can be maybe disappointing to some people, or whatever the case. But I love that you're standing in the gap here and advocating and say, hey, I did this. I love the Lord. I'm doing ministry now, and it's all going to be okay. Just encourage someone who's listening to this that wants to be able to relate to their kid, but is maybe a little disappointed, and just the importance of loving him well and how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're disappointed with your kid because they're not into what you wanted them to be into, like, it's going to sound mean, but I think it's true. Like, you just need to repent from that. Yeah. Like, you're just going to have to do some heart work and say, like, this is my kid. This is the kid that God gave me. They're a gift from the Lord. Even though their hobbies annoy me,
right?
Like, they are a gift from God. God has given me this child to nurture and protect and help grow. And if you'll let go of video games being inherently a waste of time or sinful or something, and open yourself up to the idea that there's some good here, there's some potential to be unpacked, you can start asking questions and engaging that world in a way that's going to draw you closer to each other. And probably your child will listen a little bit better when you do draw some lines, because boundaries are always more, I mean, kids want them. They don't realize it sometimes, but they want them. But they're always more effective and lead to our children's flourishing more when children know they're loved and protected, right? And then the last thing I would say is, just like you would if your kids were really into the things that you're into, like, you would probably, if you love Jesus, you would probably think of that as a avenue for your children to do ministry. Like, if you and your children both love Jesus and you're both really into sports, you would think, oh, like, hey, them playing club soccer or playing basketball or being on the debate team or something, hey, that's an opportunity to live out the gospel and point people to Jesus. Man, the same thing is true. Whatever your kids are into, they can do that there. So let's help our kids unpack ways that they can engage gaming for the glory of God and for the good of the world.
It's amazing. It's awesome. Drew, thanks for doing this. I just love meeting you and chatting with you and hearing a side that we don't talk about as much on gaming, or we tend to stay away from because I think we're fearful of it, or we don't find the value in it. So thank you for that. And then again, point everybody to your stuff so they can find more. And I know you write for all kinds of publications, but how do we find you?
Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter, Drew Dixon 82. I'm not near as active as I used to be, but it's
kids.
Yeah. And it's also, Twitter's another one of those, like, playgrounds. It can be really dangerous.
Yeah.
It can be really fun, but it can also be like a cesspool. But yeah, the place to definitely go would be lovethynerd.com. And you can follow what we're doing through Love Thy Nerd on all the social medias. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just search for Love Thy Nerd. We have a community called Love Thy Nerd Community. That's a great place to jump on and ask questions about games or things like that. Or if you just want to, like, just understand what nerdy kids are into, Love Thy Nerd Community. If you search for Love Thy Nerd Community on Facebook. We also have a Discord server So if you may not know what Discord is, don't worry if you don't.
I mean,
We've
I was
got you
sitting
covered.
here all in, like nodding, like I knew exactly what you're talking. No clue.
Yeah. And I mentioned Twitch earlier. Actually, we stream on Twitch. So we have our own channel on Twitch, and that's a cool place to check out because it's streaming. We're streaming games, but we're streaming it in a way that I think is more loving, less I don't know, like provocative or whatever, but in a way that I think embodies who we're trying to be, loving people and loving nerds and being the love of Jesus to nerds in our culture. And then finally, I would challenge you to maybe think about going on a trip with us. We actually do nerd mission trips where we take nerds with us to gaming conventions and board gaming conventions and video game conventions, Comic Cons, those kinds of things, and look for ways to do relational outreach in those spaces. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Nice to meet you. We'll link everything in podcast notes.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess I should mention, did I mention this on the podcast? I'm writing a book about Christian parenting. So it's worth mentioning.
Yes.
Yeah, about video games. So it's essentially the book's going to be a Christian parent's guide to video games. So the book will unpack the good, the bad, the ugly in the world of video gaming and help parents understand what games are and how they operate, and then also how to navigate them with their kids. And then finally, there's actually going to be a chapter in it that challenges parents to do what I talked about a little bit ago, like engage video games missionally. Like how can we engage the space in a way that's going to help point the world to Jesus.
That's awesome. And that'll be out next summer, like a 2022 summer.
Yeah. So this is very early publicizing of my book, but it'll come out and that'll be fun.
Well, come back on when it's out too, and we'll chat about it more and get more information. That'd be awesome. All right. Thanks a ton, friend.
Yeah. Thank you. Enjoyed being on it.
Huge thank you to Drew Dixon for being on the podcast, and I will be sure and link everything he referenced in our podcast notes so you can find those tools and resources to help you with your gamers. And be sure and share this with your friends that also have kids in their lives that could benefit from hearing what Drew has to say. And then for today's Messy Minute, I want to talk to you about spending time with God. And yes, that is kind of a hard right turn from video gaming, but I think it's important as we are in the middle of the summer and we get maybe a little tired, we get a little strained with our time. And so I was thinking about this discussion I had with Max Lucado on the podcast several months ago. And I asked him specifically how he relates to the Lord, how he spends time with the Lord in the morning. And as someone who's influenced my life so greatly with his writings and all that Max Lucado does, I was just so interested in what his quiet time looks like. And I was so encouraged by what he said. He just said that he tries to only read a couple of verses every morning, a couple of verses. And I don't know what I expected, but I thought maybe he would have some grand way of doing this. And he read, chapters upon chapters and spent hours and commentaries. And I'm sure he does some of that when he's writing and preparing sermons. But he said, just spend a few minutes and read a couple of verses. And so that's what I've been doing this summer. And I've been reading through the book of Luke. And I want to share with you one little passage that I read this week that really meant something to me. It was in Luke 6, around 43. Actually, I'm going to go to 44. It says, the good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For out of the overflow of the heart, his mouth speaks. And I just really tried to ponder that verse for several days. And I just want to encourage you with that out of the overflow of our heart is what comes from our mouth. And so as we're talking to our kids, our friends, our spouses, our neighbors, it's so important that our heart is right with the Lord. And so if I could just encourage you in one thing today, it's just spend time with the Lord. It doesn't have to be anything massive. It doesn't have to feel like this huge, overwhelming, grab all the commentaries, find 2 hours to be quiet, but find a couple of verses and spend time in it. Ask the Lord how he would speak to you in your life through it. And then from that, I think you'll see, like I've been seeing, that it changes the way we interact with others, the way we speak to our kids, to our family, to those around us. And so I just want to encourage you in that. Take time, spend time with the Lord, even if it's just a quick minute, and ask him to speak through his scripture. And I just can almost promise you that you will see a transformation in what comes out of your mouth and how you act and how you love your people well. I'm so glad you're with us today. I know your days are busy, so as always, thank you for joining us as we pardon the mess.